Hello, 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 and let me be the last to wish everybody out there a happy new year in 2025. The MLS season is underway, and that means it's time for Season 4 of the CHGO Fire Podcast. Hello, I'm Alex Campbell. It is great to be back live from our CHGO studios in the West Loop here in Chicago. Thanks for joining us, whether you are watching on YouTube, on our CHGO Fast channels, wherever you might be streaming, or listening on your preferred podcast platform. Good to be back. And we've got a lot to squeeze into a short amount of time today, and I am squeezed in here in Studio B alongside two very good friends of the show, two familiar faces or voices to CHGO Fire, Joe Chatz of On Tap Sports, Tim Hotze, Men in Red 97. Gentlemen, welcome back. Good to have you. Happy new MLS season.
Oh, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Good being back.
So we're going to divide this show into basically two halves. In the first half, we're going to talk about soccer or soccer-adjacent things with the Fire's two games so far this year, that loss in Columbus, the ridiculous draw we witnessed over the weekend at home against DC United. And then we're going to spend the second half of the show gushing about the Fire's new training facility that had its official ribbon cutting yesterday and that we got to tour and see lots of cool things. But I think, guys, the biggest theme soccer-wise to touch on from these first 2 weeks is we are seeing the growing pains that come with the implementation of how Gregg Berhalter wants a soccer team to play. We saw 2 goals directly come against Columbus from struggles with it. We saw the Fire start very poorly against DC United, and Christian Benteke ends up scoring there. I think I've seen, and you guys probably have as well, what feels like a lot of borderline panicking. It's way too early, right? Joe, I'll start with you, to be overly concerned given both the time and the extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, it's the second week. I know everyone loves to panic, but this is a long season. These things take time, and the goal is just a playoff qualification, right? If we're just going to be existential, that's the goal, and it's too early to panic. But understandably, some frustrating results, and it feels like a little bit of, oh, this is happening again. I know that Morel goal felt like that for Fire fans. It's pretty funny to watch, honestly. But it's just, you can understand the feelings, but if you're panicking now, come on, let's relax.
And you can see the ideas and progress, which I don't think we've seen from the Fire in so long. So that's
right.
what I'm taking from it. And when there were 9 first-team players that were unavailable with injury, 2 19-year-olds starting in the midfield against a team that had Benteke, that had between them 3 professional top-level starts. I mean, Sergio Orahel had more than that in MLS Next Pro. I don't know how we rate that level. So it's really far from panicking time. If everyone's healthy and we're not seeing better results in a few weeks, that's the time to hit the panic button.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you talk about the players not being super familiar with the style. You referenced that the Fire haven't really had a tactical identity for years. And, Jack Elliott is coming from Philly where they play red ball. So the center backs, even though he is a good passer, that was not his job in that team. I think Kellen Acosta is really the only guy, and it's been years since he was at LA and in the USMNT picture consistently. That's the last time he was being asked to play like this. And it's been a while, and you mentioned, Tim, all the injuries. When Berhalter is drawing up the system, a Sam Rogers and Jonathan Dean right half of the back four is not what this was designed for.
Yeah, and that meant that all the attacks had to go through the left, right? Which we saw what Bamba can do, but the classic Gregg Berhalter MLS attack is you get the ball, say up the right side or the left side, it doesn't really matter, it would switch, but then do a long switch pass to Bamba on the other side and, score. And you can't do that when you have none of the guys you're planning on that right side of the pitch.
Yeah, and Joe, I think, we talk about how the Fire play. I think we were all a little surprised to show up at Soldier Field and see the Bears lines still painted on the grass, given that the Bears haven't been there in months.
MLS is so back, baby.
It is. So for those of you unfamiliar, the Bears and the Fire between them, because it's Park District owned, they get 5 grass replacements a year. The understanding is the Fire basically get 2. And so I would think the Fire are going to wait until the weather is not awful to exercise the first one of those. But, Joe, we did get the quote after the game from new signing Philip Zinkernagel, who made the astute point. that the surface at Soldier Field is not conducive to playing possession soccer.
It was awesome. I'm really curious. I mean, obviously he's a Champo veteran, so like I'm very curious to be like, okay, what's the worst ground you've played on? Because that guy has played everywhere and
he's also played on permafrost in northern Norway.
Exactly. So for him to say that, like, come on, Chicago, like, take a little perspective, Park District. Let's get this a little bit better because it objectively looked terrible. And if it's going to affect the play, like 2-2 is fine, but you can't have that affecting the system for either team.
But you know what? Despite that, though, I mean, he got his first MLS point off a secondary assist, which is classic.
Hockey assist, baby.
And then he got a second one 30 seconds later off a nearly, well, not 30, it felt like 30 seconds later, off a nearly identical goal. We'll talk about that in a minute. I think it's also a brief spoiler on the training center piece of the day. The grass fields they are growing there are among the nicest in the country. There's 8 of them in the entire country. 2 of them are sitting right now in the near west side in Little Italy at that training center. And the other 6 are all either NFL or MLS stadium permanent surfaces. So that's the other thing. There's now going to be just a giant juxtaposition between how nice the grass the Fire practice on is and what they're playing on.
And I've asked they won't let me hit a wedge on it, so
and not yet anyway. So maybe at the end of the year when they tear it all up, they'll let us.
Oh, Jake is not going to let us do that. Nope, Jake, the great groundskeeper, will never let us do it.
Ask for forgiveness rather than permission. No. Anyway,
that's a way to get your credentials yanked, Joe.
It is. So we've referenced the injuries a little bit already. I'm curious for you guys. Who are you most concerned about, whether it's they might be out a while or it's they are hindering the team's style? Tim, I'll start with you. Of the guys who have either been limited or we haven't seen at all, what's the one that you're kind of circling?
I think it has to be Leonardo Barroso, the new U22 right back signing. I think that he was brought in. I mean, you bring in a guy from Sporting CP's academy system, coming up through the B team, not because they can defend as a right back, but because they can play as a wing back. And that's essential to the way that the team wants to play. All respect to Jonathan Dean. I think he had a good couple of games. He's just not going to give you that kind of a game.
Right, and I think the expectation is going to be that Barroso and Andrew Gutman kind of take turns being the fullback to bomb forward. And you mentioned it earlier, in the current setup, the first 2 games, it's always going to be Gutman, which is fine because he can do that, and him and Bamba have combined well. But again, it's limiting. And it was built around this idea that Barroso was going to be an in-possession asset. Yeah, for those who don't know him, he is the starter for Portugal's under-21 team at right back. He was rated super high by Sporting. Again, you don't pay a transfer fee for a guy who's almost a kid unless you rate him really highly. Joe, how about you? Other than Barroso, I think that might be the consensus number 1. What else is up there for you?
Romani Kwame. He's got the ability to play on the wings and in the midfield, and he's playing for a contract. He's on a loan with an option for purchase. If he wants to be in MLS long term, he's going to have to prove that he's worth it and worth it for the team. So I think he's one of these guys. He hasn't really featured much. He played a little bit in the preseason and then picked up another knock. So it might take a little bit longer, but he's one of these guys that if he can fit in well, he is an ultimate floor raiser for this team.
Absolutely, and he's another guy with some athleticism in midfield. I think we saw this particularly this past week. I think Sergio Orihel and Sam Williams acquitted themselves well, but at a certain level in the pros, inertia becomes a bit of a problem. And no offense to those guys, they are not the largest humans. And Kellen Acosta, though he's not a huge guy, has that experience of knowing how to use your body, knowing how to position themselves. And I think Kouame is going to help in that regard, too, in terms of being a guy who's versatile and, if asked to provide some defensive solidity, will at least bring some physicality that those young guys can't.
And I think that will also enable Acosta to start playing his game a little bit more. I mean, he was in this spot that Guti was playing in the first game, right? Like, very different players, very different profiles.
And speaking of Brian Gutierrez, Brian, please stop elbowing people, but please keep scoring goals. We do like that. Okay, the one singular soccer play we do have to talk about is that bicycle kick at the end of the home opener. That was a ludicrous goal. The Fire looked like they had escaped several times. Chris Brady denied Dominic Baggi on a point-blank header. He then denied a Christian Benteke shot with one of those saves you see keepers make where somehow they're already in the save and then they extend again and get a fingertip to it. And then Christian Benteke hit a penalty into the 30th row of the south end. So it really felt like, okay, the Fire maybe have something on their side tonight and they're going to get that win. And then with literally the last kick of the game, Jacob Morel scores the goal of his life.
Yep.
I think the biggest emotion afterwards was people feeling bad for Chris Brady.
Yeah.
That was led by Gregg Berhalter. Happy birthday, Chris, by the way. Yesterday, 21. So hopefully he's, had some fun to think less about this experience.
A lot of Gatorade.
Exactly.
Pedialyte.
If Gatorade is the official sponsor of beverages at the training center, I did not make a note of that. Berhalter made the point that he thought Chris had a man-of-the-match performance. The folks at MLS HQ agreed, as he was put in the team of the match day for MLS. I'm curious, though, I think we all had similar reactions. Joe used the word funny, which I think is one of the adjectives.
Yep.
What were your emotions? Like, how is it just, man, we've watched this a million times, or like, how did you process what we witnessed and how we heard the players react to it?
So I immediately went back to thinking about the goal, I think it was 2 years ago, where Lucas Zelarayan scored from midfield. And obviously not the same, but those both ended up in draws at the last minute thanks to a miracle. And this one, it was like, okay, that's a once-in-a-lifetime soccer play that we would all go for, and okay, cool. Like, we saw the highlight already. This is what it is. So it was definitely a different type of vibe, and also just the getting a point was nice. But between that and the Benteke PK miss, I think everyone was kind of content leaving with a point. I thought that's all the fire we're going to get from that game coming in. So, it happened in the worst possible way, but it's clear that there was something good from it.
And I think people in the locker room, when we went in, you could tell that they were still feeling positive about everything. I mean, some guys were taking it a little bit more like dropping two, which is understandable, but I think on the whole, the vibe was that the team had played well, and I think they know that they are playing like a team that will get wins, which I don't think was the case for a long stretches of the past few seasons.
Right, especially when, we see what Jack Elliott could be as a weapon on set pieces, as a guy who gets maybe 2 primary assists in this game. He still hasn't been credited for that second one, so we'll call it 1.5 right now. My favorite reaction after the game to this goal, again, we're going to shout out Philip Zinkernagel for a second
I like
quote.
this guy. He's a good quote.
Crazy goal, once-in-a-lifetime goal. Shit happens. That was his reaction, and I think that kind of sums it up. Berhalter was even like, at the end, he's like, on the one hand, 2-2 feels fair, basically making the point that if the way it ends tied is that Benteke scores the penalty, and then nothing happens in the last couple of minutes, everyone's like, well, that's too bad, but it was a clear PK, and Benteke's very good, and whatever, you move on. So we'll have to see how this kind of progresses, because again, we have no idea yet if the Fire are going to be any healthier this next game. So I guess the fact that the vibes were
Goody's
still
back, though, so that
Goody
gives us
is back,
something.
that helps. I'm interested to see, it's probably a third straight start for Sergio Orejel next time around. Do we see Kouame come back in? Do we see Kuipers be able to go a full 90? I guess, is there anything
He
in
seemed to
particular?
think that he could,
That was what did he say, that he thought after one more week of training he'll be 100%?
Yeah, that he was feeling good enough, but it was precautionary getting taken out, which is good because we don't want to see Kuipers out for long stretches, right? Like, that would be bad for the team with the roster build.
No, absolutely nobody does. And then I think, though, I'm still interested, and they've alluded that there might be another move or two coming. I don't think it's going to be anything big, but Joe, if it was something, it does kind of feel like another veteran striker kind of seems like the obvious thing to be looking at here.
Yeah, someone in the striker room would be nice. The David Pareba injury in preseason kind of screwed up some of those plans, and it looks like Dean Bolts is going to be with Fire 2 initially for the most part, occupying that backup Tom Barlow role in that third striker spot. So it's going to be, they could use another body in that spot, similar to how Omar Gonzalez fills in at center back. I could see them bringing in somebody, but I got to tell you, I don't know who, because it's not like they're going to bring back Kai Kamara, which is the easiest answer for everybody right now.
Yep.
I mean,
He's still out there. He's still a free agent, and he's not coming back to the Fire.
No, the one I'm voting for is Jossie Zardes, but the fact that Jossie is unsigned by anyone in MLS tells me that either he's injured or he's not interested, or because that's a guy who, even at 50%, as a guy who scored as many goals as he has, he's a good locker presence. Like, he's an Omar Gonzalez at the very minimum. So I'm interested to see if he ends up on a team. We'll have to wait and see. We're going to take a quick break here in a moment, but after the break, we got a lot of stuff to say about the afternoon we had yesterday at the Fire's new training center, and soccer aside, I think there's a lot to be excited about there. We will be right back after this. Today is Chicago's birthday, and that also means it is happy birthday here to all of us at CHGO, turning 3 today. A big shout out to everybody for the promotion. You might see a truck with our logo and a big QR code rolling around the city today. If you do, please scan that. Please take a selfie, tag CHGO Sports. And the big promotion as part of this birthday celebration is our best Die Hard sale and deal ever, but it is just for today. $34 annual pass. That is less than $3 a month to be a CHGO diehard. Get exclusive access to extra content, including some extra writing from some of our beat writers and things of that nature. You get access to the CHGO Discord lounge. We've got dedicated pages for all sorts of stuff, including the Fire, the Stars, and soccer in general. Always good to see people in those chats. Again, that sale today ends at midnight, so please keep an eye out for that. Any promotions you might see online, there'll be stuff shared throughout the day. We got balloons and banners and everything hanging around here. It's a big day here at CHGO.
Bears are doing an emergency pod right now.
Yeah, there's an ongoing emergency pod because the Chicago Bears have acquired an offensive lineman. That is all I know, but that's a good thing.
Interior offensive lineman.
Yeah, any offensive linemen are good offensive linemen when you are the Chicago Bears. So happy birthday to us. If you're already a diehard, thank you for your support. If you're not, we hope you decide on this celebratory day to become one. All right, so yesterday was the official ribbon cutting of the new Endeavor Health Training Center that is located at 14th Street and Ashland Avenue here in Chicago. The Fire welcoming some dignitaries. We heard a few words from Gregg Berhalter and from Joe Mansueto on the Fire side of things. We heard from Alderman Jason Irvin about the impact on the 28th Ward that this new facility sits in. We heard from some other people involved in Chicago housing and with experience in that realm. I think it was a really interesting day in general, but I think I want to start, guys, with the remarks we heard at the beginning, because I think a few things stood out there. I think the biggest one being that the Obla homes, which are a Chicago Housing Authority site, have been the subject of a lot of debate for years. The remaining housing from this project has been kind of left semi-abandoned for years, and people in this community have been promised a lot over the years. There's been several construction projects that have been proposed, some popular, some unpopular, but none of them have happened. And so I think the biggest theme running through yesterday was the Fire made a plan, and they have actually executed it in a way that lots of other people who had ideas for this piece of land have not done.
And they promised things to the residents of the home. Like they haven't been updated, and that was something that Mary Baggett, who spoke at the event and is one of the residents of that complex, pointed out. Like, they have not been renovated in 26 years, despite 26 years of promises. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, because it was important to them, the Fire insisted it be in the lease. And initially the CHA said, that's a deal breaker. And then they said, well, it's a deal breaker for us. And so it eventually came to pass that it's in there. So I think that the team has to get props for actually following through with supporting the community there.
Right, and there's some, I think it's $10 million promised initially, and it's projected like a $40 million economic impact over the next 10 years. Your point there are 330 apartment units that are being gutted and totally redone that the Fire are funding as part of that investment. Joe, the other person I think we heard a lot of interesting things from was a friend of ours and a guy who is a Fire original. That's Paul Cadwell, Caddy, who has been kind of a shepherd through this process, a guy who has been involved in the academy, been involved in community stuff. He's worn a lot of hats for the Fire, but I think it was really interesting to hear somebody like him who, unlike a lot of other people at the Fire, have been around for so long that they can really appreciate the arc it's taken to get here.
Yeah, it's obviously a process. Everything, I mean, construction's construction. It's exhausting in every form that it can be. But I think the point is that after yesterday is now the Fire are in the position of they need to now show that they are willing to honor these commitments that they've made. They've built their facility. They've got this land. They've got what they need. Now, as everything was said yesterday, it's about holding up their end of the bargain for the community, and that's going to be seen over the coming years, right? It's not something that's going to change today or tomorrow, but now is the phase where we can say, oh, let's see what's actually happening, and let's see what this economic impact actually is, and let's see how these housing units get renovated, how timely that is, where are people living now. Those are the discussions that can happen now that this is really a partnership that needs to extend a long time, and it's about using those resources properly. It's the city of Chicago. It's always going to be something interesting, but there is now the point of saying, okay, Fire have gotten their stuff. Now let's see how this can actually help the community around it.
I think it's also worth saying, you make the point about getting stuff done in Chicago is hard. The Fire went from saying they were going to do this and working to buy the land to opening that facility in 4 years in downtown. If you're not familiar, that is warp speed for getting anything zoned and built of this scale around here. But to that point, and to your point, Joe, about following through on the commitments, it helps when there is no question about where the source of the money is and where the money is coming from, and you're not relying on, credit or loans or anything like that, and who to talk to. The other thing, and Tim, I wanted to ask you about this before we move on, is I think the coolest line of the day was Gregg Berhalter saying, how cool would it be that if 15 years from now, there's a player in the first team who is from the 28th Ward, who's from this neighborhood? Because for those who don't know, the Fire had never had a player born and raised in Chicago proper until Andre Reynolds a few years ago. His younger brother, Justin, is now in the first team. But I think the Fire went for such a long time without anybody immediately local from any ward in the team that I think that vision, it got repeated by Mansueto and some others on the day. I think that vision is one that you really like to hear somebody whose job is the soccer. It's great to hear him out that.
And having the academy in the city limits, in the heart of the city, close to transit, where it's fairly easy to get to from all over the city, I think is a big part of that. And it's a huge focus for the team going forward. For a team that really wants to have the best academy in MLS and build out the future of the club through that, which is really great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's both very practical things of a location in the city of Chicago is super accessible to local communities, especially people who might not be able to afford, transportation of other sorts, or might not have the time, or might not have a parent to drive them to things of this nature. It's huge for that. Also, if you want to be cynical, a huge base of the soccer fandom around this city, and when you talk about youth soccer, there's a whole lot of money going around up in the north suburbs, and going from the north burbs to Bridgeview is a hike and a half that people don't particularly like making, even if they have a car to drive themselves there. So there's lots of goodwill reasons, there's practical reasons, there's financial reasons. Speaking of financials, I think we wanted to go around and say highlight some the coolest things we saw yesterday, and I don't think we have a number on this, but we were told the most expensive thing in the building is this treadmill pool that they have in the facility, which is apparently the nicest thing you can buy.
They wouldn't let me go in. I was really upset.
He was ready to jump. He did in his full outfit, including
buddy, I was way more prepared than you even know.
For those who don't know what that is, it is a pool where the floor can rise, fall, change angles, and thus the name, it moves. So it's really key in helping players build strength when they're recovering from injuries, being able to test how strong they are without putting them in a situation where they could, re-injure themselves or things of that nature. They talked about how they toured NFL facilities, including the Bears facility. The two that stood out is they toured the brand new facilities at both Tottenham Hotspur and Liverpool in the Premier League. For those who don't know him, Caddy has long connections. He was a Manchester United youth player in his younger days, so he's still got a lot of family, friends, and other contacts still across the pond. So I think the pool that was identified as the most expensive toy in the building, I think, has to be mentioned. Of course.
Yeah, I mean that, or just outside of the building, the pitch quality. I mean, it's fantastic. It's got heating. It's got really good moisture control. It looked fantastic, even with the weather that we've had lately. And it's just going to look better once it actually gets a chance to start growing.
Right, and one of the reasons we couldn't go out on it yesterday is it's 85% grass, 15% these artificial fibers that make sure all of the grass grows straight up and down. Those are in, and you can see the grass slowly growing to catch up. So they can't cut it until the natural grass passes up, and then so the players won't be out on that for a little while still. But they've got two very nice turf fields.
They were practicing on it, I think, the one time that I
they've been practicing on it. Yeah.
They can touch the pitch. We can't touch the pitch.
Right.
That's the difference between us and them to the Fire.
Yeah, you have to bend. You got to pray. It's a whole thing. It just takes too long.
I was saying yesterday they need the little signs you see at Premier League stadiums that are just they're about. If you're watching on YouTube or streaming, there are these little signs that are at like a lot of the Premier League pitches they're basically at foot level, and they say keep off the grass in font you have to like almost squint to see. And it's very funny both because of how quaint it is, but at the same time it's like no wonder people mess up because the dumb tourists with their cameras are not looking down at their feet. Joe, you wanted to wax lyrical, I think, about the quality of the food and the snacks we found lying around.
I love a good snack room. Coffee room, smoothie room. They've got a whole new dietary setup. Everyone's got a specific smoothie. I'll do a story on that later in the year. I've been observing. It all looks very good, but a lot of greens, a lot of reds, a lot of purples, randomly enough. So just looking through, I've got a picture in front of me. There's a lot of honey stinger stuff, go-go squeeze, those amino acid type things that I wouldn't try, but athletes sure.
Chia seeds?
I don't see chia seeds. A lot of
they're
pistachios.
they're not that healthy.
These are like the snacks. These aren't the smoothie thing.
I
thinking of
didn't get to go
Sorry.
through the fridge. I was actually I tried.
smoothies.
They've got like those raw RX bars that I guess.
Never been a big fan personally.
I mean, I feel like you have to be a pro athlete.
There's
to
no
love those.
inflammatory seed oils in that one.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, the
go.
things we learn. But the highlight for me, of course, is just the basic pretzels. I love a good little Snyder's bag of pretzels. That looked great, but of course they were the unsalted kind because pro athletes.
Also, shout out to the leg of Hamoni Barrico that was in the reception room, and if we can make a request to get one of those in the media room for Messy Day, that would not go amiss.
The players also need to talk to the team about getting a first team ham that just stays up there.
Just permanently, there's just a
first
leg
team
of ham that just hangs
It'll
out.
help with recruitment. It'll help with bringing in top quality players from around the world.
I will never leave.
Just go over to Spain and Portugal and just be carrying around just like on a cart. You've just got a leg of Hamoni Barrico that they just take with them.
Like, how do you get that in the States? You got to like bring a cello case or something to like pack it in and hope you don't get caught at TSA. There's so many. Oh my gosh, we're not committing international
Well, the
crimes.
Fire have a budget for figuring stuff like this out. We don't.
Yeah, exactly. Private
Correct.
jets, maybe.
So before we go, though, we do have to look ahead a little bit. The Fire are about to embark on a 3-game road trip that's going to rack up some frequent flyer miles. Dallas, Toronto, Vancouver. They'll come back to Chicago in between all of those. It's too early in the season for needing things or anything being must win, but you got to beat Toronto FC, right? Because everybody has to beat Toronto FC.
4 points from the next 3 is a very rational expectation. You got to steal a point somewhere. I actually think it could be in Vancouver because they've just had a really busy schedule. But Dallas, we were talking earlier, I think is going to be a high-flying game regardless.
It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be really
And
fun.
it's
Minimal
Brimstone Cup, so it's Berhalter's first chance to win hardware with the Fire.
Yes, this is a perfect example that if you lose, the Brimstone Cup is not important and who cares, and if you win, it's a trophy.
It's a dented trophy, but it's a trophy.
Quite. But again, it kind of adds to the charm of it all. The next home game is March 29th against Montreal. That's going to be another one that they have circled looking for points. Ardox podcast here at CHGO Fire will be right before that, and we'll have a chance to recap the entire road trip. The next show after that is on April 8th, and that, of course, is Inter Miami week. Yes, they have moved the Messi game all the way up to the second month of the season in hopes that he can't get injured by then, because obviously that has been a bit of an issue. But this road trip is really worth watching, guys, because the Fire have a brutal stretch. It begins right around that Miami game. April and May is a tough run for the Fire.
Yep.
Bank some points when you can.
Yep.
All right, well, we're going to wrap things up here on CHGO Fire. Nice unison, nice synergy we've got there.
Deep analysis. That's what you bring us on for.
We've spent way too much time together the last few weeks.
That is what we're here for. Yes, we might be getting borderline sick of each other, or maybe not. Because,
No,
hey,
you're both lovely.
Hey, if we are, it's a well-timed road trip. This, I think, has been a well-timed return to the CHGO Fire podcast. It is good to be back here in studio. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tim, for being here. Very appreciated. Thank you to Sarah on the ones and twos behind the scenes. Always appreciate it very much. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Thank you for watching on our CHGO Fast channels. Remember to check out our one-day diehard deal for CHGO's birthday. If you are watching on any of those platforms live or relatively live, or if you are listening to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts within a couple hours of it posting later this afternoon. I think that's going to just about do it for this first episode of the season. We'll be back in a couple weeks, also with CHGO Stars. That's going to take some practice getting used to. I will probably need to have a Red Stars tip jar of some sort just for the laughs about it. But until then, I'm Alex Campbell, and I'll see you next time.